Hello and welcome back. I'm so glad you've all tuned in. And as we all know, the Duke of Sussex had his interview sit down on ITV with Tom Bradby. It was so highly anticipated. And I know, of course, a lot of people want to know the details. So these are a few highlights. I know that not everyone could get access to this interview, so I will give a couple of highlights here for you and try to give them to you as directly as possible. So let's go straight into this. So the Duke of Sussex, in a couple of highlights, spoke a lot about the toxicity of the British press. And he spoke and said this. When he was asked by Tom Bradby why he had chosen to write his memoir, he said this, quote, 38 years. 38 years of having my story told by so many different people with intentional spin and distortion felt like a good time to write my own story and be able to tell it for myself. And he also expounds that a bit later, which I will go into. So we all know the highlights and the cliff notes where he has admitted the fact that he did take Class A drugs as a teenager at a country house, but said it did not make him feel happy. And he said that this was important to acknowledge in quotes when he talked about his drug taking. So he also talked about a couple of things concerning his beard as well. You know, we all love the beard. And he spoke about it concerning his wedding, where he said that he asked Queen Elizabeth for permission to keep his beard for his own wedding, which she allowed. But he interestingly said that his brother, Prince William, was unhappy. And when he was asked later about, the disagreement that he had with his brother, he said this quote, I think a lot of it is to do with, I refer to it as heir spare, but also older brother, younger brother. There's a level of competition there, end quote. That too was a great point, which I will also go on to later. And he also talked about Princess Diana and the fact that he cried only once and he felt guilty. He also talked about the fact that he and his brother, they were not allowed to show emotion. We all know the famous clips of them walking outside the palace and all the people reaching out to them. And he said that when they were holding their hands to comfort them, that their hands were wet. And then, it occurred to him that those were tears from them wiping away the tears from their eyes. But he himself was surprised that he and his brother, they just had to smile through it and show no emotion. And that was very sad. And, he does talk about the fact that it was so wrong how the paparazzi had acted taking photographs of his mother when in fact they should have been helping her. There is this whole thread that's through the interview where he keeps talking about the press and the toxicity that was therein. Let's just go into a couple of cliff points here that were so standout for me. He talked about the fact that Charles was not made for, the single parent role. In this interview, it's quite interesting that a lot of people expected that he would have a lot of criticism for his dad, but it's interesting he doesn't, actually go very in-depth into him. He does really center on William and, interestingly enough, Camilla as well. So why does he talk about Camilla? He said this concerning members of his family, that he was upset that some of them had, quote, gotten in bed with the devil to rehabilitate their reputations. He does go on to talk about the fact that Camilla, with his dad's blessing, and I think it was an excerpt from the book that was read, that with the blessing of his dad, she went on this whole press campaign to regain a good public image. And he said he did not have a problem with that, but he does talk about certain members there were complicit, in quotes, in leaking stories at the, quote, detriment to others. And that's where he drew the line. And yeah, there he really does basically focus on Camilla. And as I said before, that some members there, according to him, had gotten in bed with the devil to rehabilitate their reputations. When we think about the fact that he talks about how the paparazzi acted, taking pictures of Diana in the back of the Paris car when she was, fighting for her life instead of helping her. They were just trying to get final images and get some money. He has real contempt for, the unethical standards in the press. And he, as I said, he continues on and on about that. So he also talks about the fact that William and Kate, quote, made Meghan feel unwelcomed. So there he does not hold back. He talks about the fact that the Fab Four, according to him, were never going to work. He knew that because of, the whole competition thing. And he says this, that he thought that the four, when Meghan joined, would bring them closer, would bring him and William closer, but it didn't work. And, it quickly became Meghan versus Kate. And when he was asked by Tom Bradby why they did not welcome her, I'm talking about now Kate and William, he gives this list. She says because she was American, actress, divorcee, biracial. It's fascinating that, he does talk about that and really get to the heart of that. In a surprising move, he cited the Jeremy Clarkson article that he wrote that was a complete outrage and people were calling him out. I covered that, so if you want to check for links, click here. He wrote some pretty outrageous things about Meghan. He talked about his stepmother, which is quite interesting. I did not know he called Camilla that. And he spoke about how she advocates for, violence, especially where women are concerned, gender-based violence. She's an advocate concerning that. And he said that the world was waiting for a comment from the monarchy concerning Jeremy Clarkson, and they did not say anything. And he said this, quote, their silence was deafening. And, he also cited the Ngozi Fulani example, saying that he was happy that Ngozi sat down for that reconciliation with Lady Susan Hussey, and he was happy for that. And he also talked about how the palace was quick on that to get them to sit down. And he also did touch on the fact that the response of Lady Susan Hussey towards Ngozi Fulani was not because, according to him, racism, but he did say that it was unconscious bias. So that also gives me the segue into the whole question where Tom Bradby asked him about Meghan's comments to Oprah, that someone had a comment on Archie's skin color and concerns about that. And Tom Bradby asked him about racism, who was a family member who was racist. And Harry just instantly asked him, when did Meghan say that? When did any of them say that, the family members were racist? That was such a surprising moment. And he went on to say that, let me look for this. He said this, that Meghan never said any of them were racist, in quotes. He said that he would never name the individual who had asked about the color of Archie's skin. And he said this. He also talked about what had happened with Ngozi Fulani. And he said that he was speaking up about that because of they had, quote, unconscious bias. And he differentiates that from racism because he said that, unconscious bias, according to him, is as a result of how someone is brought up. And he knows that according to his own relationships with people there in the palace, he does not consider, his immediate family racist. But he did acknowledge that it could be unconscious bias. So he said that for all of the issues that had happened, the palace had spoken up and said that they would have some kind of diversity training, and that did not happen. That's what Prince Harry said. He also said that, when someone is called out for unconscious bias and they don't change, then that's when it can descend into racism. And he said he wants to help his family see their unconscious bias. So that was a very, very interesting part. Please leave your thoughts on that. And he also did say that he believes in monarchy, and that the reason he wanted to remove himself from being in the UK and stepping them back was because, quote, he wanted to remove himself from the competition for the front pages, end quote. And when he was asked whether, he would ever return to any kind of service there, he said that if his dad asked him for help across the Commonwealth, that he may. And he said that he and Meghan are still continuing that same type of work across the world. And that's what he actually initially wanted. He wanted to step back but continue serving the Queen at the time. And now, of course, it's his dad, in a role, but not being taxpayer funded and, in a safe environment. So that was interesting as well. So leave your thoughts on that. That was a highlight for me. So he also did talk about the fact that for him, that even though they had stepped away from the UK, that he found that the press was damaging the image of the UK because he thought that when he moved his family away from there, that the stories would stop. And he felt that because they did not stop, he has to keep speaking out. And when he was asked, why, some people are upset at him, some people want him to shut up, some people, they champion him and support him in what he is doing. And I know it's interesting, he asked Tom Bradby, why are they upset at him? For what? And it was interesting, Prince Harry, he is a very bold one. And, of course, Tom Bradby did go into the fact that some people want him to keep quiet about all of this. But he said that he could not, because he wants this to be for, historical purposes as well. And I will look for where I wrote it down. It was so good. He said this. It was, quote, necessary and essential for historical fact, that he wants to have his side out so that when his kids look back and when people look back, that there will be his side of the story as well, as to why he stepped back, as to what happened. And it's also interesting that he said that when he was asked by Tom Bradby, did he or Meghan do anything wrong? He said he's sure that they may have done something wrong. And he's asked time and time again, what did they do wrong? But he's never gotten anything in response. So isn't that interesting as well? And in the interview, this was another key moment as well, where the Duke of Sussex talks about that altercation between he and his brother, the alleged assault. And he talked about the trauma of, Princess Diana's death. And he read the excerpt from his book where his brother knocked him to the ground, allegedly, and he fell on the bowl. So that was a very sad detail, and I think that needs to be given a lot more weight. And, it was quite interesting as they played the clip of him narrating that moment, that it was just so straightforward, not dramatic, but you could feel it was so moving, so deeply moving. Absolutely sad how that relationship has gone. And he also said this, in another argument, William told him that he wanted him to be happy, quote, on Mummy's life, end quote. And Prince Harry claimed that the brothers only used on Mummy's life, in quotes, in extremely rare circumstances when something was integral to get across. And it was a reference to the brothers' late mother, of course, Diana, and he implied that it was a way that the brothers communicated in emergencies to show the level of importance around a topic. But Harry said that he didn't believe William when he used the phrase. And so, he does talk about that as well. And it's interesting, another thread that a lot of us picked up on was he does not want to burn any bridges. In this interview, I think that's why I think he really went a lot more gently on them than he could have. Of course, the topics he touched on were, very, very crucial and important. Him being assaulted by his brother, by no means anything that anyone can sniff at. That is so momentous and needs to be talked about, and there needs to be accountability for that. But you could see, all in all, what was really going on was him wanting there to be true reconciliation between him and his family. And it is quite true, there was no hint of vengefulness in him, no spite or malice. He was just telling his story, no dramaticism, as I said. And that for me lends a lot of credence to what he says. And it's quite interesting as well when circling back to him talking about how Meghan was received, he does touch on the fact that there were quite a lot of reasons. And as I said before, that, she was biracial, divorced, American, and perhaps he felt like that was a some kind of barrier to them viewing her as someone who could, join the family. And he said this, quote, "A lot of stereotyping happened that I was guilty of as well. So the fact that I had that in the back of my mind, and some of the things that my brother and sister-in-law were saying, felt to me that stereotyping was causing a barrier to them welcoming her in," end quote. So, he also does talk on that as well. And what happened with Meghan and the competition, that was a major thing. And it's quite fascinating when he talks about competition and how, the family, it filters to them. He said this, quote, "You can't hide from that, especially within my family. Newspapers are laid out in every single palace house that's around. So yes, it does create this competition. And if you're the new kid on the block stealing the limelight, not a limelight that you've asked to be put in, the British press have decided it for you because it sells newspapers," end quote. So yet again, he talks about the press, and I do hope that as he talks about the genuine reconciliation between his family, that perhaps will go around the world and have that ripple effect, according to what he said. I truly do hope that the press can take a chance as well to reevaluate and have some type of reconciliation with Prince Harry as well. He has truly been hurt by them in a very strong way, and I touched on that concerning the coverage, talking about his time in Afghanistan and how I felt it was so careless, how it was phrased in so many outlets. So let's hope that this reconciliation can be across the board. So once again, share your thoughts with me in the comment section on these points below. It's interesting in all this, and I'm gonna just add my own opinion here, that there's something so heartwarming about Prince Harry. You don't have to necessarily agree with everything he says, but there is a sense of honesty, a very vulnerable quality about him, that he does speak from the heart. And I think a lot of people have said this over the years, that he wears his heart on his sleeve, and that's something that is so reminiscent of his mother, where even she herself admitted that she does a lot of things from the heart. And I could see a lot of that in, the way he talks, a lot of honesty, and it truly is heartwarming. I mean, you can't help but feel such empathy for him, and there's just such a lovable quality about him. And this really stood out for me when he talked about him getting Meghan. And first of all, he talks about how William and Kate were Suits fans. Who would have thought, he says. He thought they would all be together, and he thought that it would bring them all closer. And he's also honest about the fact that he strongly thought that they did not think that someone like him, who he said himself that he was the third wheel to William and Kate on many of their engagements, and he said it was fun and awkward at times, which is so true. I think we can all agree to that. That was a very honest moment. And according to him, he believes that they did not think that someone like him could get someone like Meghan. It does show a lot about the mentality that was going on there. That's a very revelatory statement in itself, on how he felt he was viewed, and perhaps how he was viewed and how he viewed himself. So as I said before, if people can just get out of their own bubbles and echo chambers and just listen to this man talking, there are very real moments here, and moments that are not from a place of ego, just a place where, he's talking from the heart. And I wonder if he himself thought that he could get someone like Meghan. Such an interesting part of the interview as well. And he also talked about, in answer to the question, that is it all leaks, or is it sometimes journalists doing their job, or is it briefing? And he did say that a royal source, in quotes, is the palace briefing the press. He says when you see those quotes with senior palace officials said or royal sources said, he said that for him that is the palace briefing the press. And he said that there were heinous things being said from the palace about his wife, and he said that that really hurt him. And he said about this whole experience that it has been very hard, but it has been worth it. There's been a lot of, quote, relief and catharsis for him, and he has made peace with it. And he knows that the significance of him speaking up will mean a lot for a lot of people. And I think he means for people across the Commonwealth, people of color, people, who are of African descent, who've seen how Meghan has been treated. He says that for there to be acknowledgement would be so great. And he says that he is at peace, and maybe, he said, that infuriates some people, because he said this, some people thought that Meghan would leave. Isn't that so interesting? But he says that he left too. So he says that perhaps that's why some people are infuriated with him being happy, and he wants to assure people that he has happiness in his life. And he says that safety for him and his family is a priority. His family feels safe in the US. And he says that right now he's in a good headspace to have good conversations with the members of his family concerning any reconciliation, and not to get himself in a negative headspace. And he says that he's never been happier. But he also acknowledged that it's difficult for him to go back to the UK, but he loves his family. He does love them. And I think he really does want there to be acknowledgement of what had happened. He really wants there to be, and he said this, he does not think that William and Charles will read the book, but he wants them to have a chance to talk, and what they discussed there in terms of them healing to be in private. That's what he says. So yeah, all in all, I do feel that he does not, as I've strongly suspected, want to tear down the monarchy. He just wants them to acknowledge some of the things that went wrong. And he did, once again, talking about unconscious bias, he did say this, that was quite interesting, that there has to be acknowledgement, that he said, especially like in interracial marriages, that sometimes he said on the white side that people do, they do some things, like, for example, what he said, talking about what color the children might be, and not in any positive way. And he said that he wants to help his family. He wants to speak to his family and perhaps have some healing. And I think that that's great. And also he was asked by Tom Bradby that, is he looking back too much? Does he need to look ahead now and just forget about the past and not keep drudging it up, according to people? But, he did say that he is looking forward, and that, of course, the documentary that he made and the book would be look backs. But now, as I said before, he said he's in a great headspace. He's a lot of relief from it, and he's happy that, historical way that his narrative is out as well. So those were a couple of highlights to me. There is just a lot more, but I wanted to share this with you because I know a lot of people are looking for these highlights without any spin on them, and not everyone was able to access the interview. So these are a couple of highlights, and of course we are looking forward to his 60 Minutes interview, as well as his Good Morning America and his sit down on the show with Stephen Colbert. So looking forward to all this. Share your thoughts and highlights with me in the comment section below. Thank you all for watching. I love you all. And special thank you to those who support my channel, to my Patreon, PayPal, and membership supporters. I want to give a heartfelt thank you and appreciation for your loving support for my work. And I want to give a shout out to a couple of you here. A special thank you to you, James Calvin Daniels. Thank you for your long time support for this channel. I appreciate you, and I pray for God to bless you. Thank you to Anna M. Jackson. Thank you so very much for all the ways you've supported this channel. You truly do warm my heart. Thank you. And Betty Wright, thank you so very much for your giving, for your love, for your comments. I want to say God bless you. And a very special thank you to you, Connie Balmer. Thank you so very much for your giving and your support. God bless you, and I love you so dearly. Once again, thank you to all who support this channel financially. God bless you all. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, click that subscribe button, let YouTube know you enjoyed what you watched. I love you all. Leave your comments below, and I will catch you in the next one. Have a blessed one.